like to call the meeting of the Budget Review Committee to order. It's Thursday, April 16th, 2020 at 7 p.m. and this is via teleconference. As chairman of the Budget Review Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing WebEx through the city's IT department for this electronic meeting. All members of the Budget Review Committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously with this meeting through the platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen to the meeting through dialing the following number: 978-990-5298 and using the password 273974. The public may also view this meeting on Comcast Channel 16. Providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at www.nashuanh.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall. Also providing a mechanism for public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. Also adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. If in the event the entire public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes will be taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. So let's start by taking roll call. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law, and why you are attending at offline. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. I am alone and I'm practicing self-distancing. Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
I am here. I am at home. I'm alone. I can hear you and I'm social distancing.
Alderman Ernest Jetty.
I'm here. I'm alone. I can hear you. And I'm not at the meeting because I'm obeying the order to stay home.
Alderman Jan Schmidt.
I am here, I am alone, and I am at home because I'm following the CDC guidelines.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Yes, I am here. I am at home. I am alone, and I'm following the governor's executive order.
And our chairman, Richard Dowd.
Yes, I'm here. I'm alone. I can hear you, and I'm practicing social distancing in accordance with the governor's law. So
also in attendance, Mr. Chairman, is Alderman Karen and Alderman Clay. And John Griffin, CFO Controller. Is there anybody else that I did not call?
Linda
Gathright?
Harriet.
Okay, excuse me.
Thank you.
Did you say the mayor was in attendance? I don't see him.
David,
Alderman Dave Fredette is also present.
Okay,
Good.
so,
Alderman Lopez is also present.
all right. Anyone else we missed? Okay,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you have 6 voting members present.
thank you. So everybody's on mute except the clerk. So communications,
There is none.
unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R 20016, amending the purpose of fiscal year 2020, unlike escrow for the Community Development Division. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Okay, the motion on the floor is amending the purpose of fiscal year 2020, unlike escrow for the Community Development Division. Are there any questions? Seeing none, would you please take the roll?
Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. The next piece of new business resolutions.
Also before us this evening is R 20018. That is relative to the transfer of $25,000 from Department 194 contingency account 70100, general contingency, to Department 109 civic and community activities, accounting classification 56, outside agencies, for the purpose of providing funding to the National Association for the Elderly. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion of final passage by roll call.
Okay, the motion on the floor is for final passage of R 20-18 relative to the transfer of $25,000 from Department 194 contingency account 7100 general contingency to Department 109 civic and community activities accounting classification 56 outside agencies for the purpose of providing funding to the National Association for the Elderly. Alderman Karen, would you like to speak to that at all?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. As you know, for the last 5 years, the National Senior Center has been given $25,000 for its maintenance and upkeep of the senior center at 70 Temple Street. We have required, as a board of directors, that $5,000 of that goes into the reserve emergency funding, and the rest is used for upkeep of the facility, basically repainting, putting new lighting in. In the last couple of years, we have been doing major cleaning, professional cleaning in the bathrooms and our kitchen at least twice a year now. So with that being said, this year, as you know, because of the center being closed and because of this pandemic that we have, the board and I would like to ask that instead of using that $20,000 toward maintenance other than the professional power cleaning of the bathrooms in the kitchen, that we be allowed to use some of that money for operating costs if needed. And as always, we appreciate the city's willingness to give the senior center this funding every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions or discussion? Alderman Wiltshire. If you're on the phone, you're gonna have to tell me your name, but Alderman Wiltshire was first with her hand up.
Okay, I would support the motion and also the use of the funds for operating if they need it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any restrictions in the legislation. Mr. Griffin, do you know? I don't think there is. As to their use.
There is none, as Alder and Karen indicated. That's traditionally how they use the funds, but given the current situation, there is no restrictions.
Thanks, appreciate it. Alderman Clemmons, did you want to say something?
No, that was my question. Thank you.
Great minds think alike. Okay, so the motion is for final passage, to recommend final passage to the full board of R 20018. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the support from the committee. I appreciate it, and please all stay well. Thank you.
You too, Alderman Karen. Yes, with the next resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R 20025, relative to the approval of funding for the rebuild of the solid waste CAT compactor from the Capital Equipment Reserve Fund, known as SURF, during fiscal year 2020, and the amount not to exceed $500,000. This was approved at the Board of Public Works meetings on 4/8/20 this year with a favorable recommendation. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Yeah, we can go back to it, but you missed one, R 2019, but we can address this one right now.
Okay,
We can go back to it. No problem. Okay, so this is R 20025, again, relative to the approval of funding for the rebuild of solid waste CAT compactor from the Capital Reserve Fund, SURF, during the FY 2020 in an amount not to exceed $500,000. Is there anyone that'd like to talk to that? Mr. LaFleur?
Yep, I can speak to it if you'd like.
Okay.
This is our 1999 CAT compactor that we had at the landfill. It's no longer operating. The engine seized up on it. It had multiple electrical problems with it. So we went out to CAT and we asked them what the certified rebuild would do. It strips the entire machine down to the frame, makes sure the frame's 100% fine, puts all brand new parts in it, and gives us a 4-year warranty on the machine. If we were to purchase a brand new machine right now, it'd be $1 million machine and you'd only get a 3-year warranty on it. So this is definitely our best bet.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this resolution? I don't see anyone. Okay, the resolution is R 20025, relative to the approval of funding for the rebuild of the solid waste CAT compactor from the Capital Equipment Reserve Fund, SURF, during FY 2020 in the amount not to exceed $500,000. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you
Very
all.
good. Now, we can go back to R 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us, out of order, Resolution 20019, authorizing the city of Nashua to enter into contracts with the Nashua Community College, Riviera University, Town of Hudson, Town of Merrimack, and Plus Company for transfer services. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, is there anyone that wants to talk to this? No. I know we have the contracts. Mr. Griffin, is because of what's going on, is this, if we approve, this is starts 1 July anyway and runs for a whole year, so
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's very similar to past contracts that the board has approved. Too early to tell when the reopening will take place for some of these services. But I think in the spirit of moving this forward, a favorable recommendation will be in order.
all right, the most important, Ben? Did you have something?
No.
Okay, thought I heard somebody. So the most important part of this resolution is it provides revenue to the city. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea, Alderman Dowd,
Yes, you forgot Alderman Jettie.
oh, Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 6-0.
Very good. Okay, new business ordinances.
Stand by. There is none.
Okay, would somebody like a motion to take R 20-023 from the table?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to remove from the table R 20-023 relative to the adoption of the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget for the city of Nashua, general enterprise and special revenue funds. There will be a public hearing scheduled for May 20th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Nashua High School auditorium. Can I have this by roll call?
Yes, but before we do that, there's a very distinct chance that we are going to have to find a different way to do that public hearing. And we have already have guidance for doing public hearings remotely and like we're doing this meeting. So more to follow on that. So there's a good chance it will not be at Nashua High North Auditorium, but again, as time goes on, we'll let you know more information. Yes, please take the roll.
Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea, Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, taking our 20-023 from the table. Tonight, we're going to be talking pretty much revenues and some of the financial services of the city. I had formulated a bunch of questions that I had sent out. I sent them ahead to Mr. Griffin and Mr. Fredette, and they'll do their best to answer those questions. I'm going to let them start off and address the revenues as they would like. And then if we go through different sections and you have questions, please flag me so I can, is that the way you'd rather do it, Mr. Griffin or Mr. Fredette?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll let whichever one of you wants to start the ball rolling.
Yeah, maybe, Mr. Chairman, I could kind of set the table for what we'd like to accomplish tonight. We're going to talk about revenues, which is a little bit different. Historically, each department would concentrate on their own revenues, but we felt it proper in this particular budget for David and I, to Mr. Fredette and I, to go through the revenues. And to the extent you have any questions, you can always get the answer from the individual departments. David will start off with the general fund revenues, and he and I will interject as necessary and answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman? Alderman Dowd?
You're on mute. Alderman Dowd, you're on mute.
Good point. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, this is Dave Fredette. Revenues, the general fund revenues, I'm assuming everybody has their budget books with them. I found at the beginning of the book on the yellow pages 31 through 48. The total estimated revenue for general fund this year is about $69.5 million, of which the school department and financial services represent 93% of that revenue. The rest of it is made up of all the other departments. I don't know if you people have specific questions on any department, but for financial services, on page 35, there was a question about the motor vehicle permit fees. That's, the registration fees. We do budget that very conservatively. We expect that will probably be about level this year compared to last year. And, normally I really don't know what next year will bring because of what's going on right now. But we budget that very conservatively because in the past, back in the recession of 2008, 9, 10, that time frame, we lost quite a bit of revenue in that line item. And what happens if we budget conservatively, we end up with usually a decent surplus that they can be used usually to help offset the tax rate in the new budget year. The other thing I would point out is over the last few years, we've done very well on interest income. Rates, if you remember, back in 2010, 11, 12, rates were very, very low. And last year they were going up quite a bit, where we were getting somewhere between 1.6, even 2% on some of the investments. Unfortunately, they have gone down drastically over the last 5 weeks to now where we're back down to 0.10, 0.25, 0.5% interest. It's changed drastically. So I'm going to have to make sure that that's budget conservatively because those rates, from everything I have been reading, maybe will not increase that quickly over the next year. Again, the other area that has a lot of the revenue is the school department. I'm not sure if you want me to go over any specific line there, but that is found on page 47. And the biggest amount there, of course, comes from the state, which is the state adequacy aid, and that is projected to increase next year based on information we received this year. That their total is $44 million.
Okay. Are we tending to have an issue with the education? The governor just canceled school for the rest of the year, and thank goodness it's in the last quarter. But do we see any significant reduction in 2020 revenues this year, or have most of them been collected already?
Most of them from the state have been collected already. The big ones are all in. So I don't see a problem with the rest of this fiscal year. Next year, I'm not really sure what's going to happen because I'm sure you've heard the governor say that, the state's going to be hurting. And depending on how quickly they get reimbursed by the federal government for costs, I really don't know exactly how that's going to play out for the towns and cities. Maybe some of the state, maybe some of the aldermen have a better idea there. We have a lot of state reps on the board, so I haven't seen or heard anything specifically.
Yeah, I can see 4 of them right now, but
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I did have I don't know if it's appropriate now, but I did have a question, just a general question about the revenues.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is what? Because obviously we're facing unknown times, but what I am curious about is what is known. How much of these revenues, like what do they go to? In particular, how many employees do they fund, and like, are we expecting that if these fall short, you know, how are we going to make them up in the following year? Because I assume that you're a conservative budgeter, Mr. Fredette, but you know, I don't think even you could have guessed that this was going to happen. So I'm just curious if we're going to be facing a major issue halfway through if we go off of what's in this budget book.
Can I answer that, Alderman Dowd?
Yes, go ahead.
To the best of my ability. I can only say the revenues that I have control of, or the city has control of, I feel pretty confident even in what we've estimated for fiscal year 21, we should be able to meet. I budget them very conservatively. The unknown is what the state's revenue, what will happen to us with the state revenue. I really, you know, we are given a number. Those numbers are actually in the book right now. I don't know if that would change in the fall. As you know, we set the tax rate in October, and the state numbers what they give us. They know the numbers that we're going to get, and we have to put that in the calculation of the tax rate. In other words, we have no way to change that. So, but I feel pretty confident about the numbers we have control of for next year. I mean, if they're left fairly like they are now, I don't think we'll have any problems myself.
That is great to hear. Especially, I have confidence in what you say. I do. So to hear you say that makes me at ease. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I understand that people are getting much better at being able to do things remotely to the city clerk's office for revenues and with your office, Treasurer Fredette. In fact, I heard that car registrations are up. So I feel pretty good about those revenues. The one revenue, and I can't put my hands on which page it was on, but that I have an issue with is it was $350,000 anticipated in parking violations for 2021.
Alderman Dowd, I could first address that I think CFO Griffin might answer, but the parking violations, $350,000, was always money that was raised, but it used to be off budget. And this year, it's actually part of the budget. That's why you're seeing it actually on the yellow pages. It used to be a revolving fund or where the money stayed in the account and the expenses came out. Now it's reflected more like any kind of operating budget that we have for any other department.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah, that explains why it was sitting there for 2021, didn't show in 2020.
Right, Mr. Chairman, if I may, John Griffin.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Griffin.
As you recall, several months ago, we created, with your approval, an expendable trust fund for parking initiatives.
Yep.
And as you may recall, any revenues in this particular account, or this area, this department, minus the expenses that are in Department 158, will be transferred in the next budget year. So done on a calendar basis, will be transferred to that expendable trust fund. It was designed after the amounts from regular parking revenue that go into the downtown improvement.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead, Treasurer Fredette.
Sorry, it's a little tough because I'm just on the phone. I'm not on the screen, so I can't see. I did want to say that I am very proud of my staff here at City Hall. Since we have closed, I have had people in here every day, and we are doing everything online, by mail, drop off, and we are able to service everybody as if they came into the building. It takes a little longer, but we're actually doing everything: new cars, transfers, titles, renewals, and the employees have been absolutely excellent coming in. They don't all come in at the same time, but it's a smaller staff each day that's here, and our phones are ringing off the hooks, our emails are increased a lot, but just today alone, we had the biggest electronic funds come in for renewals. We had almost 900 registrations come online today for the month of May. And that's the biggest we've ever had since we started the program. And so people are reading the renewal notices and they get in the mail that this is how they have to do it, or they can drop off stuff at City Hall or mail it. So I'm very pleased about that. And yes, we have noticed our emails. A lot of people are buying new cars at this time.
They're doing that because the car dealerships are giving them great deals.
Right.
They're even making their payments for a few months.
Yeah, so that people are taking advantage of that can anyways.
Right. I'm going to open it up to questions on the general revenues in a minute, but I know that I conservatively estimate our general fund revenues, and I always feel 100% confident that we're going to have more revenues than anticipated. In this year, I wouldn't want to fool around with that because 2021 is an unknown. We still don't know what's happening. I heard today one college isn't opening up for a year till a year from September, which is kind of scary. But anyway, are there any questions on the general revenue fund? If I can't see you waving a hand, you'll have to say your name. Nope, no questions? All right, what's the next topic you want to pick up?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to respond to one of your questions with regard to the fire departments.
Yes.
The ambulance. So if we look at page 38, and it's titled dispatch services for 350,000.
All right, 38, dispatch services. There we go. Yep.
So as you recall, we originally were going to create a revolving fund for those revenues and literally transfer the dispatch costs into that fund. Because of the spending cap not being an issue at this time, we put all the we kept all the dispatch costs in the fire department budget. And through legislation, by your approval, we put the 350,000 in this line item. So that's why I just wanted to make sure that everything is going according to plan.
So, and then next year it's 360,500.
Right,
So,
that's a 3% increase that was negotiated.
And that's offsetting the NFR's dispatchers.
Yes, I know you're going to be speaking with the fire department soon, but it does a lot to fund the dispatch operations. I think Chief Rhodes will indicate that the cost of the dispatches is more than that number. But it's very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other question, and I'm not sure where it's going to fill in, but it has to do with revenues for, I know Alderman Wilshire and Clemens probably realize this, but in past years when, let me backtrack a second. We're spending a lot of money we're getting promises from the state and the federal government that they're going to reimburse. And there's a better than average chance that that money is going to come in after July 1st. typically we run into an issue because we can't go back to the 2020 budget. When we had a spending cap, we couldn't bring it into the current year budget because it was, and Mr. Griffin can probably explain it better, it was a problem. And I'm told that it's no longer a problem. Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are well poised to recover as much dollars as we can related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Because of the complexity and the severity of the pandemic, it's likely that those reimbursements may not come in fiscal 20. That's why you folks, through the mayor proposing certain transfers, that's why you're moving money from point A to point B, specifically in the loss prevention department. So as we go forward and see departments that can't overspend their budget, we have areas that we can transfer through your approval monies into those departments. It's very different than a snowstorm, but similarly problematic. As far as getting any kind of revenue, FEMA revenue, that has to be appropriated by, it comes in as general fund revenue and can be appropriated as unanticipated. So that may very well happen in fiscal 21.
Mm-hmm. Does everybody understand that? So if it comes in after July, go ahead, who is speaking?
It's Ben Clemens.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, I just wanted to put, this is a great point, because this was the fundamental #1 problem with the spending cap. And the fact that we are no longer held by that, we can reimburse ourselves for everything that's going on and replenish accounts and things like that. And we can do it uninhibited. And so that was a great point to bring up, Mr. Chairman. I think that, in years past when we've had storms and things and they cross over to the fiscal year, you get some aldermen there and they say, oh, well, I can't go over the spending cap, and the money just lapses into the general fund, and it's just, some of that is just not right. And the fact that we don't have that issue anymore, I think is wonderful news. So that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out because I would be shocked, quite frankly, if the state or the federal government money came in before the 1st of July. Anyway, so when it comes up, there's several things we can do with it. It'll require action of the Board of Aldermen, but we won't be constrained. What would you like to address next, Mr. Griffin?
Well, if I could, Treasurer Fredette did an excellent job describing the general fund revenues, but I did want to point out 2 items that are very important in this particular proposal. So if we look at page 35,
Mm-hmm.
and we look at intergovernmental revenue, and we look at line number 43516, that's the second half of the unrestricted revenue that the legislature proposed and was approved. That came down to us in September, October of last year, but it's anticipated revenue this year unless things change. That's a very important number because that is part of this budget, the 69.3 million that the treasurer indicated. It wasn't anticipated last year. That's why there's a 0, but it's 1.28 million. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. Now, if there aren't any questions, I'll go to the school area.
Anyone have questions?
Yes.
All right, Alderman Clemens.
Yes.
And then Alderman Jennings.
Through you to Mr. Griffin, that money though is what the mayor said was going to be one-time funds to, I think part of it was furniture and computers and things like that for the school district. And there was I think something we're doing with the library, landscaping. That is all that money, correct?
Right, so previews of coming attractions, the 1.8, the one-time expenses are in the capital budget section, and we'll go over that because that's on this agenda. The
Yep.
school department, I'm gonna take you to that page in a minute, but that's that 2.9 million that we're hoping to still get is added to the traditional state adequacy aid to result in that, I think it's 38 million. I'm trying to get there right now. Let's get a page. We are gonna go over the appropriation side. So if we go to the page 47 of 344, and we look up at the state adequacy aid, you see how that number is much larger than 2020? That's where working with Mr. Donovan, Chief Operating Officer of the school, we're able to provide that number. And that's what Mr. Fredette says, that the state gives us that number. They know what that number is.
Mhm.
So that's the school part. That's the desks and the deferred maintenance and the books and things like that. I just wanted to point out that of the increase in revenue, 4.7 million of the increase is due to these one-time revenue.
But, okay, but I guess my question is, everything that this one-time revenue, everything in the budget that we're spending this on is a one-time cost?
Correct. It would, I take that back. As the mayor indicated last week, he did fund 3 ELL teachers, 200,000, 150 for the salary and 50,000. And I can definitely show you that in the contingency area of the budget.
Yeah, that
Okay,
definitely
so
can't be one.
But that's the only amount.
Go ahead.
So the rest of it is, so besides for the 3 ELL teachers, the rest of it is one-time cost.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
my question, so my follow-up question is this: that we know we're getting that money in late September, right? Usually, is it possible that, and I would hope, other than the teachers, is that something we're going to hold off spending until we know we definitely have the money? I would hope.
I would think so. Treasurer Fredette would, he knows more about how the money comes in. But I believe once it's established, Treasurer Fredette, correct me if I'm wrong, it comes in quarterly payments or prepayments.
This is Dave Fredette. Yes, most of the funding from the state will come in either over 3 times a year or quarterly.
Okay.
But my point is, though, is that we're either going to know if it's coming or if it isn't, and so my point is that because these are one-time, or the majority of it is one-time expenses, it's not like we're not at a disadvantage because we can hold off expending it until we know whether we're going to get it. Correct?
I would say that would be the most prudent thing to do.
I would hope so.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to go to Alderman Jettie first. Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that that one of the items, if I can read this, 43514, the meals and rooms tax.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
So can you tell us how much of the, like I think the rooms and meals tax when you go to a restaurant or you get a hotel room, I think the state puts on a tax of, is it 8% or 9%? How much of that
9%.
comes to the city? And in view of the fact that restaurants and hotels are closed, do you anticipate a shortfall for fiscal year 20? And depending on how long they remain closed, is the amount that you've budgeted here realistic for fiscal year 21?
Well, I'll let Mr. Griffin answer that, but, and for 2020, we've already, as of the end of January, realized almost 4.5 million, which is against the budget of 4,516,000. So I would hope we'd make that this year, 2020, because the state's actually putting people up in hotels and paying for them, I'm leaving. And the question would be on the FY 2021 side, and I would say one of the state reps might be able to better answer that than what's the state looking at? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Alderman Dowd,
Yes. Chairman
this is Dave Fredette again.
Treasurer for that.
Yes, you're right. Fiscal year 20, we've collected everything in the rooms and meals tax. So, and again, that number is given to us usually in the early fall by the state. But Alderman Jetty is correct with all the restaurants closed in the state and other things like that. I'm sure the revenue is coming in a lot less for the state on that. So that could be a number that is affected in fiscal year 21. We just don't know right now. We just don't.
I know the number's less, but when people are doing takeout, are they still having to collect the tax? I'm seeing many heads bumping. So,
Yes,
so there is still
that,
some
but-
money coming in.
But there's money coming in, but don't forget all the bars are closed, and that also gets the 9% tax. I'm sure their revenue is down on that. So I don't know how they're going to treat that in the fiscal year 21 budget. I have no idea. I haven't heard anything.
Fortunately, as mentioned before, they always use a conservative estimate on revenues. So, Alderman Jetty.
Yeah, so of that 9%, how much does the city get?
Well, this year we got 4.4 million. The state collects hundreds of millions of dollars in the rooms and meals tax. We're a donor town when it comes to the rooms and meals tax, like most taxes in the state. We contribute a lot more to the state than we get back from them.
Okay, so do we get a percentage of that, or is or not? Is that
Alderman Jetty, if you saw the formula that has been derived over the years for that tax, you wouldn't believe it. It's one of the most complicated formulas I've ever seen. It's not just a simple percentage that comes back to us.
okay?
It's very hard to
Okay.
figure out.
Okay, I have another question
Sure, Alderman Jetty.
on 48314 bond premiums. What is that?
Okay, yes, that was a question. I'm going to do my best to explain it. It's not an easy thing to explain.
I don't ask
but-
easy questions, so.
Yeah, I know that. You're known for that, Alderman Jetty. But anyway, our bond, when bonds are in high demand, and our bonds are, we usually get about 9 bids every time we go out to sell. The investors who are buying them will offer cash to have a higher coupon on the bond, because these bonds are 20-year bonds, 25-year bonds. Most of the investors don't keep them for 20 years. They may sell them after 10. And if they can get the coupon rate a little higher by paying cash, they call that premium, they prefer to do it that way. And it helps them out on their capital gains taxes when they sell. It is a very complicated thing, and it's very hard to explain, within 5 minutes or something. But what happens is, if we're selling a bond for $5 million, and they pay us 300,000 in premium for that, then we actually only have to sell 4.7 million of principal. So if you take the 4.7 of principal, the 300 cash that is given as a premium, that makes up the 5 million that you need for the project. I know that's a little hard to understand, but that's how the premium works. It's when your bonds are in high demand, people will offer that. We've been getting bond premium now for at least 10 years. Prior to that, that didn't happen very often. But where rates are so low, they purposely want to raise that coupon rate by giving cash, so when they sell, it's more desirable. And it helps, again, with their capital gains tax. I'm not a CPA or an IRS expert, but that's a little bit of how the premium works.
Okay,
To
thank you.
some degree, it's unanticipated revenue because it's hard to figure that you'll get that. Correct, Treasurer Fredette?
Well, what happens is when we get the premium, a lot of the projects, all the projects, if we're going to spend $5 million on a sewer project and we get 300 in cash, then we only have to get principal of 4.7 million, and that goes to that project. But what happens is you always end up with a little bit more than it is needed, and that ends up on the page on the financial services, the bond premium, 132,000. And yes, that is actually unanticipated revenue, and it ends up as surplus at the end of the year.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Mr. Griffin, you want to apply to education there?
So I think the next area we want to discover is the green pages, or more particularly page 261, which is the solid waste enterprise fund.
Jeff still on?
He might not be here because he was more concentrating on the Caterpillar rebuild.
Oh.
What I'm going to do is explain the revenue,
Okay.
and
Yeah, so
what the photo will be doing all the appropriations.
yeah, when I sent the questions in, this is an area that a lot of people, especially new aldermen, have trouble understanding. It's a little bit complex, so okay, Mr. Griffin, take a shot.
Yeah, so the city has two enterprise funds. One is solid waste and one is wastewater. An enterprise fund traditionally is funded by user fees or charges for services. In the case of the city of Nashua, the revenues that I'm going to go over in a minute here do not equal the expenses associated with running the solid waste enterprise fund. So we can call it an enterprise fund, but one of the main sources of revenue is a general fund appropriation that goes into that as a revenue stream. So if we look at page 261, and you look at 44514 under charges for services, those are the disposal fees that are collected at the solid waste facility. That makes up most of the revenue, as you can see. There's other revenue that we collect, but that's the predominant one, 3.3 million estimated. It's increased slightly from 3 million, not due to any increases in fees, but the historical usage. When the finance manager in the Department of Public Works looked at the numbers, she recommended a 3.3 million target for revenue for fiscal 21. So if unless somebody has questions on some of those line items, I could move to where I can clearly articulate the amount of general fund revenue that's going to be required to have the revenues equally.
Yeah, we can do that in a second. I'm looking at interest income miscellaneous. And last year it was budgeted $100. This year it's 80,000.
Yeah, hold on there.
That would be line on page 261, line count 45207.
Right. Not quite sure what that
Alderman
is.
Dow.
Maybe David can help. Thank you.
Oh, Treasurer,
Well, I don't know.
Treasurer Fredette?
That's actually that's a good question, and I'm not sure why it was budgeted at $100 last year, and I think we may have to get back to you with a bit of understanding of that, what that was about, because that doesn't really make sense to me either. So.
Yeah, and so far we've realized in 2020, well, as of January 31st, 25,536. So 100 doesn't make any sense, but
No, and I'll find out why that was done. It could have been an error, who knows, but I will find out.
okay. And the state aid reimbursements went down. I didn't really question that because any money coming from the state these days could be suspect. The sale of recyclables, 220,000 like it was last year. And this year, as of the end of January, only looked at 93,734. Are we realizing anything from the sale of recyclables now? Didn't we just allocate money to cover it to the end of the year?
That would be a question that I would probably wait for Director Photo to explain. But you're
All right.
absolutely right. The cost of recycles is in the appropriations, and this is the revenue side. And I know she's an expert at that, at solid waste and among other things. So she would more appropriately be able to help you with that.
Yep.
We can let her know that that question is being asked.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on the revenues on the solid waste side, or questions about how the enterprise fund works at all? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, on 44288, cover material revenue. What is that?
The short answer is that's revenue that we take in cover, arguably useless deposit, or it's used to spread over.
I'm here at Nashua High School South.
When the
I want to give you an update on the
crushes
status of the city's
debris.
coronavirus response.
And
As
once
I've-
again, Director Photo would be able to articulate that, but that's what, listening to them over the years, that's what cover materials. People will pay us to have us put that into our landfill as cover.
Yeah, as I understand it, because at one point I had an opportunity for them to get some fill that a developer was trying to get rid of. So they have occasion to get paid for, it's not a lot of money really, to go and get the material and bring it and use it as fill or cover material. So, but she can explain it more than I can, because I don't know. Any other questions, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, again on 48314, bond premiums, is that the same? $990,000 in bond premiums, is that the same as what Treasurer Fredette just explained?
Alderman Dowd?
Yes, go ahead, Treasurer Fredette.
That's not quite the same. It is, the premium is the same, but the premium that you see in the yellow pages is strictly surplus. This here is actually part of the project cost. That was cash given, and it will be used for the, it might be more than one project, but it's part of the project cost, so that's not going to be surplus.
So they factor in that revenue into their project.
Right.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. We'll jump into the next one, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, so to tie up what I was explaining a few minutes ago, if we look at page 264, you'll see that the solid waste at the bottom of the page, you'll see that the solid waste appropriations are 9.862 million, and the revenues are 4.114 million. So the number that results from taking one minus the other is the general fund contribution to the operations of the solid waste enterprise. So 5.7 million is used from general fund to go into the solid waste enterprise.
Yeah, the revenues in the solid waste are a delicate thing. If you try to raise them too high, you lose all the revenue. So it's a balancing act that Director Photo can give us a lot more detail on when we talk to her. But does anybody have any questions relative to that? It's been that way for quite a while. Okay, Mr. Griffin?
Certainly. So if we look at the solid waste, the wastewater fund.
Oh, just before we go,
Oh, go right ahead.
I have one question. Treasurer Fredette, I noticed on the new debt to be issued for, we're using the estimated rate of 3%. We really think it's going to be 3%? I know you'd always do that conservatively. That's on page 265. Treasurer Fredette? Did we lose him? Treasurer Fredette, are you on mute?
Maybe I can just jump in,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. We put this budget together well before, the market kind of crashed for bonds and interest rates and everything else. So this was a number that Treasurer Fredette would have developed back in November, December.
Mm-hmm.
So he does try to be conservative, but we're hoping that the number doesn't go over 3%.
Okay.
Too early to tell at this
All right. All right. And when we see Director Photo, a lot of questions I have on recycling. So, all right, wastewater fund.
Yeah, so if we look at the revenues, on page 271, you'll see the amount that's going from 14 million user fees.
Mm-hmm.
So this fund, unlike the solid waste fund, this fund gets a significant amount of their revenue from user fee charges to residences and businesses and industrial customers.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time we had a rate increase was effective January 2016. Carolyn O'Connor, the manager of finance for DPW, and I are working on a proposal that is what she's using to create the estimated revenue, which is a 15% increase in user fees. Now, 15% seems like a lot, but on an average basis, it's in the dollars and cents. It's not quite like tax increases. Is that you, David?
Yeah, somehow I got disconnected.
Okay.
So I gave a whole answer on that. I don't think anybody heard me, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I don't know if John explained to you that we've been having calls with our financial advisor on bonds.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, what I said earlier when I guess I got cut off was 3% normally would be a conservative rate, but since this virus started, the problems with that, the bond market has not been very good to sell. The first few weeks, they could barely sell anything, and the rates did go up in the 3.5% range. The last 2 weeks have improved, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens over the next few months. And if things have to change, we'll have to let everybody know. But normally that 3% would be a concern.
Issue 2020. All right.
But you're talking about the debt service.
The new debts to be issued under the solid waste fund right now.
Yeah, that would be items that may be sold in fiscal year 21.
All right. Okay. That's all I needed to know.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else on that? No. So now we're into the wastewater. Mr. Griffin, did you want to continue?
Yeah, so again, significant revenues coming in to service the operations, both general operations and capital requirement. So that number is scheduled to increase in fiscal 21. And it's basically an ordinance change for the rates. So we will be putting together the necessary backup information to propose such an increase. For those of you that watched last night's Finance Committee meeting, where Mr. Hudson, the city engineer, was talking about the $5 million project to either dig up and lay new pipe or use some type of other technology to insert piping into the current facilities. That's all included in this area here. That's why the bonding, treasurer for debt will have a bond schedule that includes that amount when we get to that point. If anyone there's a number of revenues. They're all included in the operations of the wastewater department. And the only other item I could say of note, new folks, is that the town of Hudson actually contributes a certain amount to our capital when we service them. So that's that number. And it's expected to go up because our costs have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we have for revenue. As treasurer for debt said, we were going to do a whole review of bonding to include general bonding, solid waste bonding, and wastewater.
Any questions from anybody for wastewater? No? All right. And we'll go the actual operating budgets when we talk to the DPW.
So at this point, Mr. Chairman, we'll go back up to page 118, but I did want to completely echo the sentiments of treasurer for debt. We've got a fantastic staff up and down the line. That's how we maintain our AAA rating. That's how we can get low debt rates. And the team is really pulled together, both at City Hall. We really thank them to go into City Hall. Predominantly, that's where the technology interfaces are with the state. So David's treasurer for debt has done a fantastic job keeping all that revenue coming in and servicing the customers to the best of our ability. And in addition to that, we have a bunch of folks working remotely, trying to really contribute whatever they can to the financial aspects of this pandemic. I wanted to say that before David takes over with the details of the budget. Thank you.
Okay. So does that wrap up all the areas that I had given you questions on, or you want to just answer those in writing to us, or?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great idea. For example, you had several questions for the school special revenue.
Yeah,
And Mr. Donovan, pursuant to my request, he did a great job explaining each and every one of them. So I think, if you don't mind, I think I could do that for both the city and the school special revenue and get that out to you and the committee members sooner rather than later.
yeah, there's just a lot of little things. Most of them don't amount to a heck of a lot of money one way or the other. The one thing that I had talked to Mr. Griffin about was the Hunt building. Um, um, well, we can get into that later, I guess. That's a whole different topic of discussion.
I would say, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the committee members, special revenue funds are created because the fees collected for that purpose meet or exceed the expenses for that purpose. So that's the only way that you could create a special revenue fund, is if it's self-supporting. Now, the Hunt building or other of these special revenue funds that rely on things like camp fees and daycare services and other things. The hope is that if there isn't any services, there's no cost. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the special revenue funds, again, I was talking to Mr. Griffin earlier. There are a lot of them, and many of them serve a very important purpose. It's good example is CTE in the school system, where other towns pay us fees to send their students over to us, and the money gets put in to their special revenue fund so it can be used to replace equipment when it comes due to be expended. So it saves Board of Ed. But there are some in there that have very little money left in them. And I don't know if we're going to do it as part of this budget process, but at some point we're going to take a look at all the small ones and see if we can just dissolve the funds, because they've got very, very little money in them, and haven't been touched in a long, long time, and nobody's contributing to them. So it may be time to retire them. But does anybody have any question about any of the special revenue funds? The one I'd stay away from is the school lunch program, because that's a self-contained special revenue fund. They get money from the federal government, and they use it to do lunches, and it's basically a wash. They even pay the salaries out of it. So that one's nothing we can do with that one. So Alderman Jettie, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Regarding the special revenue fund for the school department athletics program.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about revenues from gate receipts and athletic fees, and that's balanced off, various expenses that are listed. So that doesn't mean that the gate receipts and athletic fees, I assume, are fees that are charged to the students. That doesn't mean that those gate receipts and athletic fees pay for all of the athletic expenses related to the school, does it?
Mr. Donovan, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Donovan's provided an explanation. Athletic Revenue Fund. This account generates revenues from student athlete athletic fees and gate fees. So it's going to be affected by spring sports and any possible change to fall sports. Most of the expenses are for new uniforms. So hopefully we can delay our new uniform schedule a bit and keep the fund viable.
Okay, can I follow up?
Sure.
Follow-up question?
So this balance sheet just shows that whatever money, whatever revenues are raised from gate receipts and athletic fees, are used up for these various items. But we still spend, I'm assuming, a whole lot more money on, for coaches and for other equipment and referees and other expenses related to the athletic program. Am I right about that?
Yes, Alderman Jettie, that's exactly correct. And when the school department comes over for their presentation, COO Donovan will be able to point you to those types of fees. They're definitely, the user,
Okay.
the special revenue fund was supposed to kind of take the edge off the expenses of the whole program.
Okay, thank you.
The problem's been over the years that at times with former boards of aldermen, for instance, and former board of ed, they didn't want to spend any money on athletics, particularly uniforms, and it was getting disgraceful. So they made a special revenue fund so that they could get the gate receipts, and if they needed the money for uniforms and it wasn't available in school budget, which probably hasn't been in the last 10, 15 years that I'm aware of, they can use that account to buy them. The special revenue funds were set aside so those monies could only be allocated that particular person. Like if somebody donated money to the school department for X, and they didn't want the school department spending it on something else, like paving a parking lot or something. So it goes in a special revenue account because you can only spend it in accordance with what it was put in for, and only by a vote of the board alderman.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Just as a side note, the marching bands at the high school, I was involved for quite a few years. The band boosters, or the music boosters, paid for every single expense for the music at that point in time, including instruments that cost anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000. Without getting into specifics of which ones those were, that aren't something that you'd expect a student to buy or parents to buy. And so the band boosters paid all that, but they insisted, the music boosters, that the school department buy the uniforms for the band. So that was the major expense out of the school budget. They don't get replaced that often anyway. But. Okay, any other questions? Anything on revenues? No? Okay, so Mr. Griffin and Mr. Fredette, you're going to send us the answers to all those questions, most of which you've covered tonight, but so that we can distribute those to all the aldermen, so they will have this information as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I would like to have a motion to table.
Oh, before you do that,
All right, any other questions on the budget before we?
yeah,
Alderman Dow?
Treasurer Fredette?
We still have Financial Services Division to go to, capital improvements and public safety and debt service.
Okay, yeah, I just went back to that page and noticed that, yes. All right, so financial, so that would include the appropriations, and that's financial services, that's on page 118.
Right. And that's me again, Alderman Dow. That's the Financial Services Division is made up of my area, which is tax, treasury, which includes motor vehicles. It includes the, has the accounting group that's headed by Rose Evans, includes accounts payable also, and then of course the CFO area, which is John. The budget was within the guidelines that the mayor gave us. There really isn't any significant increases except maybe postage and delivery. And what happened there was when the fiscal year 20 budget was prepared, late in 19, there was a rate increase, which I did not catch in time to change that budget. And then we also just had a small increase 2 months ago in the postage. And this is metered postage. It's not necessarily the stamps you buy at the post office. So that's why you see account 55607 on page 118 is increased from 66,000 to 73,300. It's because we actually spent 71,000 last year on postage. And there's very little we can do about that because most of the stuff we send out in the mail is by law, actually. So, but besides that, there really isn't a lot of changes within that operating budget at all. I did get some questions late this afternoon from you that was for Alderman Clemens.
Mm-hmm.
His first question was he wanted to know if there are any new positions in the budget that did not exist last year. No, there are no new positions in our budget. And he wanted to know, I'm sorry. He wanted to know
Any
how many
vacant
open
positions?
Yeah, do we have by July 1st? The only one I think we may have is a part-time motor vehicle clerk. And could we go a year without that position? I would say possibly we could.
Okay.
The next one, I haven't really had a hard time to look at that, but he's looking to see if there's any other savings possibly in our budget. If there is, it's not going to be a lot of money, but it could be in a few small line items. I'd have to really look at that. I only got this today, so I didn't have a chance to really look at the budget in detail for that question.
When I went through that part of this budget, there's not a single yellow mark on it. As I know, you're pretty frugal at putting your budget together.
Okay.
Does anybody
So
have any
that's the-
questions? Anybody have any
I'll
questions?
just, yes, it's Alderman Clemens.
Okay.
Treasurer Fredette, thank you very much for answering those questions. I appreciate it. I know you run a tight ship over there, and I really appreciate the effort, to look through there. I know, you just got those questions today, but we're in unprecedented times and facing unemployment of possibly 20%. So I think we need to, do everything that I think for me, my number one is let's keep everybody that has a job right now with the city employed. And number two, keep the taxes down as much as we can. So thank you so much for going through that. And if you could keep us updated on that part-time position, that would be great.
I will.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Treasurer Fredette on his group? No? Okay, so capital improvements.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, John Griffin here. If we look at page 250, looks to be 255.
Yep.
I can explain the typical capital improvement amounts as proposed by Mayor Dorcas. So if we look at the top portion, that's the traditional spend. We generally spend around $1 million a year in capital improvements. And as you can see up in the schedule above, it funds things like airport expansions where we pay 5% of the cost. some city building matters we have to take care of, Court Street roof replacement. Master back end, the second part of the master plan for 200,000, we're familiar with that plan. 40,000 for fire deferred maintenance and 7,000 for general street infrastructure capital. So the total is a little over $1 million. Last year, $1,025,000 last year. $1,000,000. Now, as we talked about earlier, the schedule below that is the one-time revenues. And Alderman Clemmons asked all of these one-time. So if we review them, they're all one-time. I would say that the addition to capital equipment reserve fund is very important to fund that. We'll get into that when we look at the transfers. But that $500,000 puts us in a better position than without it. Got some hydroelectric dam expenses, one timing, that goes into the trust fund. And then you have other infrastructure programs that could be used to, it wouldn't be a recurring expense. So that's where it totals 1.8 million, which matches the revenue in the revenue section.
Well, ready for questions?
Yes.
So last year, school had deferred maintenance of 100,000. We ended up having to bond a number of things that were things that would last more than 15 years. But this deferred maintenance, which should be over $1 million for the schools because of the amount of infrastructure we have in those 18 buildings. And it typically ran around 600,000, and then in the last couple of years, it's been down and down and down, and now it's zero. There's no way that I'm going to authorize, in my mind, a deferred maintenance is zero for school deferred maintenance for capital improvements. With $1 million for a library plaza that could easily be put off for a couple of years. There's two things with that plaza. One, the library has some money set aside in a special revenue account, which they could fork over some money for. Two, we could do it in a phased approach and not have to spend $1 million this year. But I would like to see, and of course it'll be up to the budget committee when we start looking at this in more serious thing. But I can't, in my mind, envision spending $1 million on a library plaza when school deferred maintenance is zero. That's ridiculous.
I agree.
Pay me now or pay me later. That's why we ended up having to tear down the old National High South, because we couldn't maintain it. And it's crazy. That's just not practical. So anyway, that's one thing I have an issue with on that. And again, I had talked to you this afternoon about on SERP. We're certainly going to have to look at, do we really need to buy what's on that list for this year, or can it get another year or two out of it? And long-term, SURF, as you and I discussed, is not funded the way it should be funded. And I don't know how we ever recover that. And that's a topic for another night. But anybody else have questions on the capital improvements projects?
I'd like to say something.
Yep.
I see Alderman Schmidt.
Thanks. I only wanted to say, I want to echo what you just said, Alderman Dowd. Anything that we can put off, it won't be damaged by being put off. Maybe go on a list for next year or the year after. Anything we can do this year to make sure this budget is a little bit lighter would be really beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Did I hear you?
Yes. Thank you. I agree with you and with what Alderman Schmidt just said, because we have to look at that library project. Much as to me it's a nice have. It would be a nice thing to have, but I think we can make do without it. And I think that $1 million can go towards paying down the tax rate and maybe putting some money into, like you said, the school improvements. My other question is on the SURF, with the interest rates being, with some of those projects, the interest rates being as low as they are, and our bond rating being as good as it is it possible that some of those might make sense to bond instead? And I'll ask you through you to Treasurer Fredette.
Treasurer Fredette.
Well, SURF is on the, SURF is, can you hear me?
Yes.
SURF is on the schedule and to talk to about tonight. And it's on page 340. If you look on page 340 in the book, those are the items that are planned to be purchased this year out of the SURF Trust Fund. And if you look at the bottom, the total amount is $4.4 million, of which $2.9 million is cash. Already $1.4 million is bond. So could there be some other items that are bonded here? I would say possibly yes, a couple of them. But we are already bonding, like I said, $1.4 million. And to Alderman Dowd's point, SURF as it is today was changed in 2010 and 11, and it has not been funded properly since then. But it's still better today than it was prior to the old way. If some of you might remember, but prior to having it this way, half the cost of SURF items used to come right out of the operating budgets of every department. So at least this does help them somewhat, where they don't have to budget that in their operating budget. But if everything is purchased that's on this list this year, and the mayor's $500,000 is put into the SURF account, we would end fiscal year 21 at around $800,000 balance, which is small, but it's still a positive balance. So I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but I think there could be a few items if you wanted to bond, but we'd like to try to get the bigger dollar items. I see a few here for over 200,000, so they may be some that we could bond also.
Yeah.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure. Alderman Clements.
Thank you. Are some of these things too things that we can put off, like in particular, the Harley Davidsons for the police department? I mean, that's $50,000 right there. I don't know what shape those bikes are in, but they're, it's like, a nice have. It's a great thing that we can do, but can we get another couple of years out of those bikes that we have, or at least one more? So stuff like that. I mean, the cars, I understand, need to be replaced, and they're on a replacement schedule for a reason, and I get that. But I guess that's where I would want to ask, and maybe we'll ask some of these departments when they come in down the road. But I mean, I think that there's an opportunity in here to hopefully save some cash.
So, yeah, it's going to be my suggestion that we go over with each department as we talk to them, the things that are in the SURF plan, and so we can get a really good idea of just how drastic, these things are, and can they last another year or two, or are we spending so much on maintenance it doesn't make sense? So, but it has to be answered by the different departments, in my opinion, anyway.
Agreed.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, I do have a question, and as we're looking at SURF, did we just approve and finance line 47? Just I think last night, the Ford box van which has a value of 62,595. So that's already been approved in this year. Am I right? Or we're talking two separate vehicles?
Alderman Dowd?
Yes, Treasurer Fredette.
Yeah, the school department has more than one box van. They are different vehicles.
Yeah, they got a bunch of them.
Yeah. And I can say the process is, after the department, we sit with each department to figure out what's needed for surf in the year. Then the mayor does meet with them and has them go through the list, and he does have them defer some of their stuff already. So this list isn't exactly what they wanted to begin with, but Alderman Clemmons is right. You would really need to ask each department, especially Public Works, Police, and Fire. Those are the big ones, to go over that list with you the night they're with you to see if there's anything else they could defer.
Yeah, because when this list was put together, it was before the pandemic. So, and before we had an issue with the 2021 budget. So we can address these when each one of those groups comes before us. And I feel that if they can push it off, I'm pretty sure they will.
But Alderman Dowd, just to make a point, if you do reduce that list, that does really nothing for the budget, because what's being funded out of the budget is the $500,000 that the mayor is going to be putting into SURF. So if that was changed, that would have an effect, but that would be a decision, amongst yourself and the mayor, of course.
So yes, and he and I are going to be talking, we already have a meeting set up.
Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, hang on one second. But if we push some of these vehicles off, we may be able to take a piece of that $500,000 and use it someplace else, maybe in school deferred maintenance. Just a thought, but I know that the 500,000 makes the SURF account a little more whole, certainly not whole. But if we defer some of the things that have to be bought in 2021, maybe we can make it a little more whole in 2022. And there's the types of things we have to think about as we go forward in our deliberations, but we don't need to solve that tonight. Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, along the same vein as you just said, I mean, if we take out, I hate to pick on them, but if we take out those two Harleys, that's $50,000. Well, does that mean now that we can take, instead of the $500,000 that the mayor's putting in here, we can put $450,000, and then that $50,000 can go somewhere else, and so on down the line, we eventually be able to. I'm going and approaching this, but it's the budget isn't going to be easy this year. That's for sure, and we're going to have to find money from a lot of different areas. But I think we can do it. My goal would be to get that tax rate down to as close to at least under 4%. I mean, we can't. In my opinion, we can't go to the taxpayers and ask them to pay 4%. Not with. We could have, if the economy was like it was in January and February, absolutely. And I would have been 100% behind that. But where it's at right now, I can't justify doing that without doing our homework here and trying to reduce this as much as we can. That's my only point. Thank you.
Yeah, Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. And I understand the point that several aldermen are making, but I lived through this movie before, my past life on the division that I work for. And when you just start, just a note of caution, you start deferring things out of SURF, that doesn't mean that they vaporize and they go away. And when somebody came up with SURF, you got to realize they put this on a strategic plan when they were going to replace some of this particular equipment. And so what gets deferred, and let's say move to the next fiscal budget, there'll be a double. You might have another box van, you might have another motorcycle or fire truck or something like that, that is coming up in that next fiscal year. So surf needs to be delicately looked at when you cut that, because in my opinion, you're not gonna have the assets. This could be discussed at a later date when we get more with the divisions, but I'm sure like the division heads will understand the proration of why they're requesting the equipment at this particular time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Anyone else? All right, so that's capital improvements. Nothing else on capital improvements from anyone? All right. Other public safety.
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, there's two items here, hydrant fees. Those are regulated fees from Penachuk, the tariff, which is approved by the Public Utility Commission of New Hampshire. So this is the fees for the myriad of hydrants that are within the city limits.
Where does that number come from, Mr. Griffin, for the budget?
Yeah, it's basically, Penachuk provides us with the adds and subtracts of hydrants. And then there's a calculation done by the billing department of Penachuk. And to the extent they have a rate increase projected or something like that, they provide our accounting manager, Rose Evans, with the estimated cost to the city within each budget year.
So it has nothing to do with flow. It's strictly the units, we're getting charged for.
There's things
hydrants.
called inch foot calculations. I'm not sure what inch foot means, but I think I misrepresented a few years ago what it's for. It's there. Obviously, when you turn on the hydrant, you want water to come out. So it's a calculation. And I know Alderman O'Brien has probably done a lot of that.
Yeah.
But it's all the hydrants. They get the counts from the fire department. They add and subtract as appropriate. And this number's been 3 million for a long time.
Right.
But it's regulated.
Yeah, no, it went up $100,000, and this fiscal F21, if we could get that 100,000 back from them, it'd be great, but we can talk to them separately.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Alderman O'Brien.
thank you. Mr. Griffin gave a very fair estimation of pretty much what I believe. Hydrants need to be maintained. They are replaced on occasional times. Some areas, some are added. The fact that Mr. Griffin says that this number has stayed stable pretty much for a period of time. Think about some of the development that has been approved and hydrants were put in. Yes, some of that was done in private in nature, but it does not go with the GPM or gallons per minute flow that were taken in the fire. I'm glad it doesn't. Sometimes if you had a lumberyard fire such as a Shagnon lumber, I imagine the amount of flow for that particular fire was phenomenal. And I would hate to see they get the bill for that amount of water, but yet it was encumbered and paid for from this hydrant fee. So they don't charge us per gallon, but basically just on the upkeep and maintenance of having the hydrants there, which kind of, we do get a rollback to some degree. When you look at the ISO, the underwriter insurance, they do measure how far your particular house is from a hydrant. And that also takes a look at the quality of training and the newness of the apparatus, the training of the firefighters. So all that together, there is a rollback. It is hidden, but what the property owner pays in insurance fees, they're receiving it by this particular, one of the things they're receiving their discount in fire insurance is because of this particular hydrant. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think some time ago, and I'd have to check with Director Marchand, that when they do a new development, I think the water lines and the hydrants are paid for by the developer now.
Right.
So we don't get, we end up with more hydrants, but other than painting them, they, I'm not sure what else they do go around and test them, and every once in a while they do flow things on them, all that jazz. But you know, I just for my own edification, I'd like to get to know how many hydrants we have and how that $3 million gets allocated. Now, if part of that is to replace some of the infrastructure under the ground, I can understand that because I've seen some of the pipes that they've brought up, and oh my God. So I just have a couple questions for them.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, my 35 years on the fire department, I have lovingly shoveled out every single one of these puppies. So, how many there are? There's quite a few. I have back problems to prove it, but the fire department, one of the duties, and thank God that we got them, the strong-willed, able-bodied people that we do hire after a snowfall, they do go out and they shovel these to make them access for the emergency. And if the plows come out and wing it back, they got to go out and shovel them again. So they do their diligence, and there's quite a few of them. Thank you.
Yeah. I do know there are some very helpful citizens of Nashville that if they have a hydrant near the house, they'll shovel it out for them. But yeah, they do shovel out a lot of hydrants, and because if your house is burning down, you don't want somebody to have to go out and shovel out, out of 10 feet of snow to find the hydrant. We'll discuss that with the Penachuk. If there are no other questions on hydrants, let's move on to street lighting.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, John Griffin. This is the poles in the city. And as you folks know, we converted to LEDs a few years ago. This number used to be in the $800,000 and $900,000 range. But because of the investment we made in the LEDs, the numbers stayed pretty stable at $500,000, if not slightly less. Streetlight maintenance as part of that operation is the city, to the extent of light malfunctions, we have to position inventory for the individuals that work on the lines can put that fixture back up. And it's been a highly successful program.
So do a lot of the lights get maintained by Eversource, or does the city have to? Because I know up here in this part of town in Ward 2, and a lot of times I've seen Eversource changing light bulbs and stuff. So where's the break?
Right. So here's the Eversource has the personnel that are certified to change light fixtures on their poles. So the 25,000 is to pre-position inventory, and if a light does go out, the call is made to Eversource to come and get the light. Actually, we might even have to meet them at the location to give them the light to put up. So that's why Eversource is out there.
Okay. I assume that includes the detectors for whether it's night or day.
Yes.
I know they've already had to replace some on the Broad Street Parkway, which I have issues with, but anyway. Alderman Bryan, did you have a question? No? Alderman O'Brien, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to say as a PSA, if anybody in the city sees that the light is out, the street lamp is out, to call public service. As you can see by this light item, we are paying for them. And it's a shame when we're paying for them and the light isn't working. So call public service so that the arrangement can be made and you're getting your tax dollar in, increasing safety in your neighborhood. Thank you.
At least in Ward 2, I know not a lot of them call their local alderman. My light's out. All right. So any questions on the street lighting? Nope. Okay, so, next is debt service contingency and interfund transfers on page 247.
Yes, Alderman Dowd.
Treasurer for that.
Yeah. Yes, page 247 in the white pages is the bonded debt service plan for the general fund. And this year, We have 7 projects estimated to be sold. Again, I just want to make sure that those are all estimates. We never sell everything that's in here. We end up selling things we don't even know about right now. But the key to all this next year is really the Performing Arts Center. If that bond gets sold, it's my understanding it would have to be done fairly quickly because of the new market tax credit. And it's probably going to be a taxable bond. And there's a lot of things on that that's going to make it a little bit more complicated than normal bonds, mainly because of the requirements of the new market tax credit. So I'm hoping, you know, by midsummer anyways, we'll have an idea of what's going on with those credits. And as you know, Director Cummins is working on that weekly anyways. So I'm sorry.
No, I
If
was
you
just
look on
gonna-
page 2. Oh,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to point out that this line shows how we keep that debt service on bonds to a fairly level line payment. And, you know, people sometimes think that if we do a $120 million bond or $118 million bond, that we're taking those bonds out tomorrow and paying for them the same day. That's not the way it works. And I Treasurer, for that, I got to applaud you for your ability to keep that line pretty level. And we don't bond anywhere near, and you could probably expand on this, anywhere near what we would be allowed to bond to. And that's why we have such a great rating with all the services. So, go ahead.
Well, that is somewhat true, yes. The projects we plan to sell is the health department building. And as you know, the board just approved another bond for that project 2 months ago, which I had no idea was coming. So that's not even in here. The public works building that's being constructed at the solid waste department. The property revaluation bond that was approved not too long ago. The hydro dam, and of course the Performing Arts Center. And we have one in the school department, but it's a very large one, and it's called the middle school project. So that would be sold over a period of years, like all the bonds. Most of the bonds I do sell over a period of years, and trying to keep the budget as controllable as possible. What's helped us over the years too are the rates. So I mean, if rates go up, that could hurt us too. So so on the general fund side, those are the 7 projects we are estimating may be sold in fiscal year 21.
Yeah, I know that the pandemic is causing the financial world to go toes up temporarily, but unlike recessions, which can take years to come out of, this is because of a pandemic. You know, if it won't happen, but if we ended up with a virus tomorrow, the financial part of the world would take off like a rocket. You know, despite any politician's involvement. So it's hard to, you know, most of these bonds are going to get paid for over the next 20, 25 years. So
right.
Once you set a rate, once you get a good rate on a bond, that's the rate going forward, unless we get a better rate and resell it. So
yes, when the rates were higher, we were able to refinance, but there's really nothing right now that could be refinanced.
Right. Anybody have any questions on debt service?
Yes, I do.
All the bonds are listed, by the way, on 248, 249. Alderman Jettie.
So the bonds that we're planning on selling or could be selling over the next year. There, as you mentioned, you mentioned the Performing Arts Center bond. you've got the estimated rate there of 5%, 5.5%. Is that because of what you just said about the new market tax credits?
No, it's because this bond will probably be a taxable bond. Because you'll have a company, part of it's because you'll have a company and they are managing the center that is a for-profit company.
Okay. And the when you and also the amount that you've got here is 15.5 million, which is what's been authorized. But the project itself is dependent on an anticipated additional 6 millions from this new market tax credits. If we don't get that new market tax credits when that's announced this summer, I guess the Board of Aldermen would have to then look at whether we have to bond the additional 6 million or more to make up the difference, and that's not something that you can anticipate in this budget, is it?
No, but that's my understanding also. So yes, you may have to increase the bond if they don't get the tax credits. Yes.
Okay. And also on the new public works building at the landfill, that's going to cost around $9 million. The $6 million bond that we've authorized was in anticipation that we would be getting around $4 million from the sale of Burke Street. But at the last budget review hearing, we learned that the sale of that Burke Street property has not gone through. So it's possible that we may have to increase that bond as well, and so that could be an additional expense because that project's going to go pretty quickly. I understand it. I think they're planning on building that within a year. So next year's budget could that could be an additional burden on next year's budget, couldn't it?
Yes, it could, and it's what you said is my understanding. Except that I've been told that they're still working on discussions of trying to sell that building. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
you ought to talk with Alderman Jenny. You ought to talk with Director Cummings. They're working on they're working diligently to finalize the sale of that building, and so I wouldn't discount the fact that we won't have that money yet.
Yes, I have talked to Director Cummings, and yes, he very much would like to sell the building, but they don't, right now, that they don't have a deal, so I don't know what's going to happen. But, and lastly, when we talk about the budget, the amount of bonding, if I, do you have an idea of what the total amount is that we currently have in outstanding bonds, including all the city portion, the school portion, Pennachuck purchase? Do you have an idea of what that is?
I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. But I believe general fund, it's somewhere in the area of $150 million. And then, of course, we have bonds for enterprise, and we have bonds for the paving, which is a special revenue fund, and we have the Pennachuck bond. But when you add them all together, I believe it's in the area of about 300 million.
Okay.
Pennachuck,
And somebody,
Pennachuck alone was 150 million.
And somebody said that the amount that we're currently bonding is well below what we'd be allowed to be. Do you know what restricts the amount of bonding that we can do? Is it a state law or part of the charter or an ordinance or?
It's a state RSA, and the city has its own guidelines, and our guidelines are stricter than the state. And again, I don't have the numbers exactly, but I know that we're bonded about 23% of what our limit really is. I don't think you'd ever go up to the limit anyways. That would be probably unaffordable, but it's based on the assessed value of your property. And there's a different percentage for the schools versus the city. But our own guidelines are a little stricter than the state's. And I can give you those exact numbers. I don't have them totally exactly, but I know it's in that 23-25% range.
Okay,
Maybe provide
thank you.
those in the written answers, if you would.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah.
any other questions on the debt service? Anybody? Nope. All right. Contingency.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, John Griffin.
Yep.
So starting on page 251, at the top, we basically have 4 accounts that house our contingency dollars. And then you can see account 700-770-100. The reason why it's 98,000 is we use some of it during the year. But we traditionally put $250,000 in contingency. You'll see next the contingency. We use the same account we've used in the past. Education priorities, 2.9 million. If you look below, that's the itemization of the one-time revenues that match up to the one-time expenses, appropriations matching up to revenue. We did speak a little bit of the zeroing out of deferred maintenance. The mayor has proposed to put $460,000 into the deferred maintenance for the school department. And he's listed all these other items that the school department had on their list. And as he mentioned to you when he talked about, or he answered some of your questions a week or so ago, line items 9 and 10 have the ELL teachers, which would be more than a one-time revenue. That would probably be embedded into their operational structure.
Mr. Griffin, at what point would that 460,000 deferred maintenance show up over in the other page?
Yeah, I think the strategy here is for you folks, the Board of Aldermen, at the right time to appropriate those monies or transfer those monies into the school district. Very similar to how you handled some of the monies in the past.
Much as I love the Board of Education and have some familiarity with it, on deferred maintenance, we might want to somehow keep that in a contingency account and have it so it can only be spent for deferred maintenance. And maybe other items on here we want to do the same thing with, but because of the situation with the school budget and the way that the mayor took a cut in it, and we still haven't actually seen the Board of Ed's actual budget yet, we need to look at that closely. If we're gonna allocate these things to these expenses, then at least some of them we probably want to make sure that they get spent that way. Same way we did with the ELL last year. Just
Right.
again, my personal opinion.
Right, that was the strategy that you used last year quite effectively.
Yep. Any questions on Do you have anything else on contingency?
I just wanted to make another point. Well, contingency police grants, that's been an annual grant that the police get that comes into contingency and then we move it. We spend it. But the contingency for negotiations, that number is the amount of money set aside by the city working with the respective employer boards that are in negotiations with the unions. So the reason why the number is 979,693 is because that's the cumulative amount of projected dollars necessary to fund the contracts in fiscal 21.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at for you, Alderman Dowd, and the rest of the committee, when we pull the money out of the budgets, the optic is not great. It looks like the increase in salaries for the departments is going to be less than the amount of money that we put in here. Hopefully I explained that, but it's something we've done traditionally. We never keep the amounts in the respective budgets until the Board of Aldermen approves the contract cost items, coupled with the approval of the transfer of monies into those departments.
So just a further clarification on that. The anticipated expenditure goes into the contingency, but in the FY 2021 budgets, they're anticipating the actual contract as presented currently, but maybe not even approved, level of funding, which drives their personnel way up costs. So more on that later.
Right, but I just wanted to make sure that the Budget Review Committee members knew that this is where we put dollars for contracts that have not been approved by the Board of Aldermen.
And based on a conversation you and I had earlier, we feel that the contingency account for 2020 should be sufficient at this time to make it to end of June.
To the extent that, yeah, so to the extent that the contracts come in with the percentages as we worked with those employer boards, you should have enough money, but it's too early to tell it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions on contingency?
One more point on that, Mr. Chairman, is that to the extent there's dollars left in contingency for negotiation, it is traditionally escrowed forward as part of the like-for-like escrow process approved by the mayor.
Right. The other thing I was actually referring to general contingency. The money's left, because we've been having to spend some money out of contingency for some things that we hope to get reimbursed for, but a lot of times whatever's left in general contingency gets put towards the tax rate, but we've had to spend some things that we hadn't anticipated. So, but we can't run that number to zero. So, or negative.
Right. Fortunately, over the last several years, we have not had to use appropriations not spent against the tax rate. We've had enough revenue surplus to use revenue surplus against it.
Okay.
Several years ago, when I first came on board in 2010, we had to use a combination. So we had to use appropriations not spent and revenues. And as Treasurer Fredette indicated, the revenue picture back in 9, 10, and 11 was not as good as it was last year or this year.
Okay. Any other questions on contingency? Seeing none. Interfund transfers, 252.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of transfers here, but I can kind of boil it down. The ones that are budgeted would be, as Treasurer Fredette indicated, the transfer to SURF. So that's where he indicated the 500,000 shows up. The one above it, transfer to the city retirement fund, that's a traditional number that we've used. What that does is when an individual retires from the city, it's captured, and the money that's paid out to that individual is transferred from this fund, expendable trust fund, city retirement, into the department's budget so the money can be paid. So that's a good way of not taxing individual departments and having them estimate what the retiree is. This is a good place to fund retirements within the city. The transfers to Holman Stadium, Mine Falls Park, and David Dean, those are matching revenues to the cell tower revenue we get. So whatever the cell tower revenue we get, we transfer it into those expendable trust funds, the Holman Stadium, Mine Falls, and David Dean Stadium. The Stellos YMCA Capital Reserve, that's an amount that we transfer. There was an agreement made, I think it was 2010 or 11, for that facility. The city pays that amount into that reserve account. And then the final two, first one is excess revenue on a calendar basis over expenses in parking. As you may recall, there's a $728,000 target. Anything above that goes into this particular expendable trust fund, downtown improvements. And the new one that we got approved this past year is transferring the excess of violation revenue, parking enforcement revenue, from the period July 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. That's the amount of revenues that exceeded the expenses for that.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Transfers?
Yes, Mr.
I
Chairman.
got Alderman O'Brien with his hand up first, and then Alderman
Okay,
Clemens.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question on the city retirement. We're talking about the basically the Public Works retirement system, correct?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this is literally the cash out to individuals that retire from the city, whether they be police, fire, treasury, accounting. This has nothing to do with the well-funded public works pension that Mr. Fredette you oversee. So this is just putting money in to a trust fund that we can use to pay the end of career payouts to a person that retires. It's got nothing. It's not like the NHRS, and it's not like the Board of Public Works.
Okay. No, thank you for the explanation. The reason I asked is sitting as liaison or as a member of that particular board, we changed a lot of administration that the city used to do. So the city is getting some of the benefits. I think Mr. Fredette could help explain it. But some of that cost for our provider, Oaken Holcomb, has come back to the retirement board and looking to recoup some of that money. Because unfortunately, we're paying out to that retirement group. And in paying that out, we're depleting the retirement fund. So it seems like not good practice to really do that. So looking for a way to try to recoup some of that negativity from actually being efficient and running a retirement system. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Clemens, did you have one?
No, that actually, Alderman O'Brien asked my question, so thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Now I would entertain a motion to retable.
Thank you,
Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion.
Alderman Clements, did you have something before that?
Yeah, just wanted to before Treasurer Fredette and CFO Griffin left, I just wanted to thank them for all they do for the city and their staff. I know it's been challenging times, and I know that going over a budget book, particularly with the revenues, after you formulate this and then everything goes to heck, isn't exactly the funnest thing to sit here and explain. But you know, you guys are, I don't know what the city would do without either one of you. And we are just really blessed to have you both. And I know that no matter what happens, we will get through because we have good financial wizards working at City Hall. So thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Clemens. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to table R20-023 by roll call.
Okay. Call the roll.
Alderman Clemens,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes,
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes,
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderman Dowd,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Okay. Next item is general discussion. I guess that's a good place. Monday night, the 20th, we have our next budget meeting, and it's with Public Health. And I've been in communication with Director Bagley, and I did offer her if she wanted to put it off because of the pandemic till later in May, she could, but no, she wants to do it on Monday. So we will be addressing the public health on Monday. If you have any questions that you would want to ask, I would like you to look at their budget rate and get me the questions ahead so we can not occupy any more of Director Bagley's time than is absolutely necessary, because I'm sure she's spending very, very long days these days, 7 days a week. So if you would do that, I'd appreciate it. And again, the question should go to Director Bagley directly and copy myself and Donna, and the answers come back through Donna to all the aldermen. So when we get these answers back, they get shared with all the aldermen, not just the budget committee. Remarks by aldermen. Alderman Wiltshire and Alderman Jettie.
I just wanted to echo Alderman Clemens' remark about the good staff, the good people we have working, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Fredette, the city clerk's office. Thank you all for showing up. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And Alderman Jettie, did you want? Yeah, and then Alderman Schmidt.
So I apologize. I apologize in advance for saying this, but when we dealt with R-20-016, the first resolution that we dealt with, I confess that I was prepared to discuss the budget. I worked on going through what we were going to talk about tonight, and I really forgot all about what was on the agenda, and that ordinance came up and it caught me by surprise, and especially after hearing fellow committee members talk about you yourself, Mr. Chairman, talking about the library project and how we're spending money on various things. I just feel that we just recommended final passage of this resolution, without really discussing it. And I, I don't know if there's anyone here tonight that can talk to us about this, or whether we could. We're having another meeting Monday night. Whether my fellow committee members would support a motion to reconsider our recommendation, just for the purpose of having someone come and explain this to us. It what it does is it allocates $40,000 for a downtown arts mural project, and I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't have a discussion about it before we recommend final passage to the rest of the board.
Well, I would say on Monday, you could bring up a motion for reconsideration. In the interim, if we could do some research on, if you could do research on what this exactly is going to cover and why. And I had thoughts about it myself. Or is this the right time to spend that kind of money? And we're spending it out of the 2020 budget. So, if the motion, everybody can think about it and then make a motion on Monday, we'll see where it goes for reconsideration. And also give an opportunity for the people that put that motion forward to give you feedback on why they think it's important.
And is it possible to have somebody from the Community Development Division come and explain to us what the project is all about and why they're recommending it?
Yeah, I think that may have been why Alderman
Lopez
was online earlier, but we can have somebody that will explain that. We'll make sure we have somebody here for the Monday meeting. I wouldn't want to spend too much time on it because we're going to be with Director Bagley, and I don't want to occupy too much of her time. And I know there was a question earlier on the spending of the bonding money for the public health building. I had talked to her about, hey, we get caught short, and I know maybe 2021 is going to have issues, and maybe 2021 definitely isn't the time to make things whole. But I've also had conversations with Justin Cates about the Gilson Street supply of emergency medical gear, which was woefully inadequate. So a lot of that will come later. But anyway, so yeah, we'll have somebody here to explain it.
Good. Thank you very much.
All right, let me see. Who else did I have that wanted to speak? Alderman Schmidt, yes.
Thank you. I just want to expound on what Alderman Wilshire said. She said, thank you for showing up. And it appears that I've received a couple of emails from people saying, these people who are working from home, they're not working very hard. They shouldn't get paid. That they should. Anyway, in any case, showing up in our city government means something different than just showing up out in the wide world. Showing up here means you work 24/7 when you have to. It means you produce what we need for the city to be one of the best cities in the country. And part of it is because of the people that we've got here today, and we're extremely grateful for them. So thank you very much. And that's all I needed to say. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Here, here.
I concur. I had an email from somebody that said that everybody in City Hall ought to be taking 50% of their salary because they're not having to go to work. I counted to 20 and didn't respond because my initial thoughts were not for publication. So, The people I've talked to in City Hall are working day and night. I get calls from Director Cummings at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock in the morning, and Director Marchand is trying to wear like 4 different hats in her position, working from home. You know, it's no easier for them being outside City Hall trying to do their job, and it's critically important to the city to continue running. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, any other remarks by Alderman? All right. We don't have need for non-public. Alderman O'Brien, motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn by roll call.
Okay, the motion is to adjourn by roll call. Would you call the roll?
Alderman Clevens,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yea. Alderman Dowd.
Yay.
Motion passes 6 yeas, 0 nays.
We're adjourned at 9:26 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, everybody.
enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.